So I did have a question for you guys. I'm wondering what you guys, think about UCLA. Look, this was not a top team today. We got our acts together. We looked good. But do you think we can pull it off against, a surprisingly good UCLA team that's mostly made up of like 6-year seniors or whatever?
Who, as we found out this week, can name pi to like the 40th digit? It's a really good question. I think we can. Whether we will or not is a really, really good question.
I know we can't start slow.
Good practice for us.
Yeah, I know we can't start slow. Those two, the teams we're going to play. Well, sorry, oops, not Notre Dame, but UCLA can score really quick and in bunches. So they can't afford to take the first quarter off. Heck no.
No, and not only that, but I in all honesty, if we don't have Eric Gentry back, I don't think we win. I think that our defense, he and that giant giraffe wingspan fill a gap that is necessary for us to fill, and we don't have anybody else that can fill it and beat a team like UCLA. We could probably beat Notre Dame without him, but I don't think we beat UCLA without him.
I agree with you, because if you saw tonight, they had, I think, like a 40-yard run and a 27-yard run, and that's Colorado. If Charbonnet's healthy, which I know he probably will be, he might not play. They're saying he might not play against Arizona or be limited, but he'll be playing against USC. And Charbonnet, you give him that much space, he's going to take it to the house. So they're very capable.
If Colorado can get those kinds of runs tonight,
right,
Charbonnet is going to be ugly, and so is Jake Bobo.
But the thing that I like about USC is what we saw tonight and what Tim talked about. The offensive line, a lot of guys are getting reps. We can have the confidence that we can keep our guys fresh. The defense is going to be, critical. Even if we don't have Gentry, I still think we find a way, because offensively we have so much depth. You're seeing the emergence of Rayleigh Brown. I think a guy who really stood out tonight was Austin Jones. So when Travis Dye went down, I'm like, wow, because all these other guys weren't getting a lot of touches. But Austin Jones basically said, I'm here, man. I'm ready to tote the rock. And Rayleigh's going to be there. And Darwin Barlow, oh my God, that guy's kind of what happened to him. And he showed in garbage time. Now, great, he's going to have a little confidence. So we just have so many offensive weapons that I don't know how UCLA is going to keep up with us. If we don't turn the ball over, we're going to be fine.
Obviously, that's where I think we get to the John Wilner question. John Wilner keeps asking about the USC-UCLA game. 2 questions.
Yeah.
1, who's going to be the first team to 60? And 2, how much will they lose by?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, is that DTR, he's had a great year. But he made a few mistakes against Oregon. And I think, you saw Kalen Bullock, right? And he's going to have to account for Kalen Bullock's speed. And, he doesn't practice against it. And I think our secondary has shown that we are very opportunistic when it comes to creating turnovers. So we've done that all year now. It's not a fluke. And so it's going to be a great game. And special teams, that's the variable, because we haven't played well in special teams. We have to kick our field goals. We have to make them, all of our extra points. But we have to lock them down on punt and kickoff returns.
Yeah, and make sure you brought up Charbonnet, and they better work on their tackling a bit. I mean, it was nice to see that Lee's back and healthy, because he was also making his tackles. But I saw, even in this game, I saw some missed tackles, and I've seen him bounce off good tacklers. So I really hope these guys hit those. If it's dummies or whatever they got to do, I don't know if they can, this late in the season, how much tackling they're doing at practice. Man, if they miss tackles on him, the people just bounce off him and he's gone. So yeah, I hope they work on that.
Here's an interesting, I just guess observation or question for you guys. I'm sorry, we got Austin on the line, and we have, was it DMAC?
Yes.
DMAC, where are you from?
I'm from LA, but I live in Japan.
Okay. Oh, okay. What time is it right now in Japan?
It is almost 5 p.m.
All right. Well, here's a question, D-Mac, for you that I'm wondering is, okay, this is SC UCLA rivalry, but how many of these guys doesn't mean anything to them, right? We have all these transfers, and we have this coaching staff that, with the exception of Dante Williams, never coached in this game before. So that is going to be interesting. Is how do you manufacture the? I mean, it's a big game. We know it, but it's not a rivalry game. And same thing for UCLA. They have a lot of transfers as well. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Is yeah, you could talk about it, but really, these guys like Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, Latrell McCutcheon, Becky Blackman, they didn't grow up in LA and face these guys in 7-on-7 in high school. So that's just, I guess, an interesting observation I was thinking about is this is going to be a little bit different because it's not your true SC UCLA rivalry.
Yeah, I don't know if it works to our advantage though, because so many times you see, I mean, USC is almost always the better team, right?
Yes.
And UCLA gets us because it's a rivalry game, and because they're up for it, and they pull out a few, kind of special plays out of their back pocket that they've been saving all year for us, and they beat us because I think a lot of times, the players, hey, these are kids, right? It gets into their heads. It's a big game, all that, right? But maybe it's an advantage to have these guys that are from all over and they're not quite as steeped in the tradition. Because what I see is I think they look incredibly tight for a group of guys who just came together this year. And they're focused on winning.
Yeah.
Right.
And Travis Dye was a huge piece of that from what we're told.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I will say this. There are still a lot of guys on this team that were on the team last year, and they got their asses handed to them last year. So if anyone needs a reminder of what UCLA did, and by the way, I'm pretty sure UCLA has been chirping all year at the USC guys. So I'm not sure. I think that there is going to be a bone to pick. There's guys like Thule. He was there for that ass kicking, right? Figueroa, he was there for that ass kicking. So these guys will be extra motivated. A lot of guys on the some guys on the defense are going to remember that game. The guys on the offensive line, maybe they're going to be a little more pissed off when they're blocking next Saturday. So I don't know, Rick. I mean, there's a lot of guys on both lines that are definitely going to remember what happened last year.
I agree with that too. I think what they won't have though, that might be that kind of X factors. They won't have the spookies, which I think the Trojans that are usually the better team. That's often why we lose is we just look a little bit dysfunctional in the UCLA game some years.
Yeah.
We're not as good a team in that game as we are in the other games. And again, they pull out a couple trick plays and then we start looking lost.
Yeah.
And I don't see that happening to this group.
Now, the coaching is far better than it was. The culture is light years better. So that defeatist culture we used to have, under previous coach, when things, do you remember how all of us watched it, right? It was like the cartoon snowball. It's up here. It's really small and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what those games felt like. And that's what that UCLA game felt like. It's just that game got away from us. And it was just a big snowball rolling downhill. But these guys are going to remember that game. And it's a rivalry game. It hasn't been as much as it's meant even nationally. So you're right, Rick. A lot of these kids, they're like USC say, what's that? It doesn't mean anything to them, and it hasn't really been a big TV matchup at all. So there's a lot to that. But these guys are teammates, and now that they have a year together, you got to tell me that Tule's not going to be at practice screaming and telling these guys that how we're going to kick some Bruin ass. I think that they're going to have some leadership on this team that will make sure the guys that transferred in, the guys that are young, they'll make sure they know what the Bruins did and what they want to do to them for revenge. And it's almost a shame that the Gutties aren't ranked ahead of us, because that'd be even more motivation if USC was behind them in the polls and in the playoff standing. So we'll see. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they leapfrog us somehow. Probably not. But that would be some added motivation.
Tim, you brought up a great point too. I think in the Pac-12 show on Wednesday, is that you have a feeling that Lincoln Riley is going to bring up some plays that he hasn't used. He's going to design some plays for UCLA and Notre Dame that he's saving, something that for each of these games. Kind of what DMAC's saying is that UCLA always seems to have some trick plays. I think. Why don't you comment on that, Tim? You had brought that up.
I'm trying to remember. Well, here's in general. I don't remember exactly what I said, but what I do know is that we're talking about Lincoln Riley, and I really do think all of a sudden he comes to USC and people don't give him the props for being the play caller that he is. It was. I know this was from Cody Kessler was talking this week with Keeley about the fact that it's really cool when you get to see just Lincoln's got 2 or 3 plays in his head, right? And he knows, and they go to the line, they do that fake snap, and then he looks, and then Caleb looks over to him, and he knows that's what we're running, and it breaks for 30 yards. And I don't know if it's gonna be like brand new trick plays or anything, but I do think there's some special sauce. And like I was talking about, I think that there's gonna be a lot of film that we looked at this week as they look at how the defense handles whatever Jed Fish in Arizona send at them. I think there's gonna be a lot of low-hanging fruit, let's say, with that, especially with that UCLA secondary, that Lincoln Riley is going to feast on.